Hi, my name's James. I'm the director of Copper Candle. In this project, I am, I suppose, an executive producer. I was the one that sort of wrote the funding application, came up with the idea, and led the team into producing what we've come up with today.
Hi, my name is Rory Foster, and I'm the director of Hello World, which is the first theatre experience to be made in the Metaverse.
So the project that we've been working on this week is an Innovate UK funded project as part of the Audience of the Future programme. It's designed foundations round 2, and the principle is that we have to go and discover what audiences want. That was a brief set in the application. What we said we're going to do is to find out what audiences want in terms of liveness in virtual theatre.
The hypothesis that we started with is that the audience might not feel connected because they were separated through different times and spaces, so we wanted to address that straight away. So the criteria really that we were looking at was interactivity, online togetherness for the audience, and a sense of how to achieve liveness within this new form.
We have 5 choices. It's basically a new level. Everyone now is pre-recorded. We have no control over this experience. It just runs as a computer game. The 5 responses are something you can choose, and they will literally play 5 different motion capture scenes that we've created with 5 different endings. And this allows us to ask about, that's in the wrong place, that's about asking the majority question. Did you like having choice to decide the story and the outline and the ending? That's something that's only possible with this method. In this production, it's quite complicated to feed into a live story, a change of narrative via a live UI. Did we need the responses to determine the story? So do we actually need to know what people think in order to make the story change? And did you notice a change in quality of the production? Because the point of the research is that doing this bit pre-recorded, having everything done in much more detail with not using the lighting desk to do control, but actually hand animating all the movements, having much higher quality sound because we're not using streaming voice, we're pre-recording the voice and having it in the actual app. That's going to make a much better quality experience. So we want to know if the audience prefers that over the live. So we'll actually identify on the survey at the end that there was a point in the show when we flipped from having live performers to pre-recorded performers. We'll explain what that is, and we'll ask them to identify when it was and see if they even noticed. And when we tell them when it was, we say, did you notice a change in the quality? Was that important to you? And which did you prefer? So my things, I've been working on user interface.
Yep.
Been designing what a UI could look like, which has been quite interesting because this is very gamey. This is very web, and this is sort of slightly theatrical, but interestingly builds on the work of Break a Leg, which was the project that we first did in Innovate UK a year ago, which also is my second point, which is what Rory was just discussing, which is the idea of this new, I mean, this is actually a really good analogy to hold up while we're talking about it, the idea that it's a virtual theatre in the Metaverse, and the product we're making isn't a series of tools, it's actually part of a virtual venue that can be used for educational outreach, it can be used to host festivals, and it can be used by companies as a receiving house who want to create their own work. What
would be the benefits of creating that kind of work in a virtual space as opposed to like a physical theatre space?
It's about outreach, reach more people, reach new audiences for companies that haven't done it before. It's about people who want to try this new virtual world to do experimentation and research. Particularly the festival idea, there's a lot of people that want to try out motion capture at the very least, but just figuring out how their performance and their productions work in metaverse environments. So it enables an industry to discover, because we still don't know what it is. If this is a platform that works and is successful, then it allows companies to expand their existing range of work to not require a physical venue, so they can have something going on in their venue and then have a simultaneous production going on somewhere else, which is like having a multi-venue when they physically limited, as well as reaching audiences internationally. It's an alternative to the live stream.
So the process for making Hello World was very similar in its beginnings to how we sort of approach making a typical devised theatre show. Working with the actors to sort of cement their movement qualities first of all, because we're working in motion capture, so we need that to be clean and very deliberate. When we're working with a motion capture system, we want to make sure that the avatars are performing in a way that's sort of very, very identifiable as human. And from there we sort of built out the characters and what their behaviours were. We thought it was easier to keep the narrative very close to the project, so we wanted to explore what would be the idea of a human in the metaverse for the first time interacting with an AI. 3, 2, 1. Okay, give me a bit of movement. Yeah, good.
So the one thing that I'm worried about is that I'm not going to hit those cubes.
But you just gesture.
So I'm just gesturing.
But
Great.
also you're pre-recorded, so James will place them where you want.
Yes, fine.
And that's never going to change.
Great, perfect.
Bingo.
Then what I'll
More cyclical motions in the middle. And then on that 3, 2, 1, it's just a huge body blast. So like, that's it, finding the space. Yeah, perfect. And then are we sending chat into the chat?
Yeah, we'll be doing that.
Yeah. Perfect.
Small? Small? You're very close. Small?
Yeah. Yeah, go.
Was it not recorded?
Nah, yeah, okay, this is... So maybe... God, you get so big. That's brilliant. That's really nice. Okay, so yeah, that's the length of the key as it is. Lovely. Yeah. You just struck upon something brilliant.
That's amazing.
When you're searching for Nikki.
Yeah.
Nikki?
Nikki?
Yes.
Nikki? Nikki?
That's amazing. That's so good.
So there's a duplicate of both characters.
Okay. Or...
kind of feel the urgency to just see it on its feet.
Yeah.
To know that we've actually got a show. So there's something to show at least.
Yeah. So the pre-recorded elements. Obviously you need them to run this show.
Yeah.
That's it.
Too close?
A little bit too close, so probably so we can see a little bit of the body and that's it, perfect.
Oh.
Oh.
So I'll pause it there.
So could we move that cue to when she starts to go, oh, I've got a voice, and moves from behind the laptop?
Yep.
Thank you.
I've got a wide shot. Where do you want the wide shot to go?
I think you've changed that now to go up to the server.
No, I haven't set it to go up to the server at all yet.
So he won't be receiving it, but...
No, he's got the screen. He's got an HDMI cable. He's literally watching my thing.
Oh, he's watching your thing?
Yeah. Just for the moment, he's got the authentic visual experience. No, I think when my internet went down, and it's messed up all my networks, so I think I just need to restart it. This is a problem. Hold it for one show because I can do this. I can say what colours you want. Oh, it's going to be like a green. Okay, I can do green.
Yeah.
But eventually that might. I don't know. It might stay. I think it will.
I mean, if it
will only stay as long as you do a sneak.
Yeah,
but the thing to do is just put that in a colour preset. And then all you do is you just change the colour, then immediately update the colour preset, and then it will stay.
Yeah, you did so, I guess.
Awesome. Cool.
Once you get to, I've got to wait 15 seconds. Now, I glitch you, you'll see yourself do that. Okay? Then I'm going to switch over to the pre-recorded version, and you'll come back on again. Oh, hang on, no, I've done that wrong, haven't I?
That's the cue before.
So she shrinks after. Yeah, and then she glitches again. What's just happened? Nikki says she's getting peckish, everyone.
Say again?
Nikki says she's getting peckish. She thinks if she whispers it, we won't notice. She forgets she's wearing a microphone.
So, yesterday we had our second day of tech for Hello World. We were building off of the plotting that we did on Monday, and we were starting to do our Q2Qs and our tech run for our performance, which went very, very well. We still had a few technical issues that we're working out today, mostly around our motion capture system and sort of making sure that it's all spatialized correctly. And it does actually look like a piece of theatre in the Metaverse, which it does, it's getting there. What we're focusing on today is running the show, making sure that the show's up to scratch for our first performance tomorrow. And we'll also be doing a couple of pre-recordings today, which look into our research question of whether we can use pre-recorded content with live audience interaction to create liveness in this new form of theatre, or whether actually the motion capture data needs to be live so that we have a sense of watching performers doing something in the moment. Yeah, I think yesterday what was really interesting was the first time that we really saw the first glimpses of the show in its entirety and not just little sections of it. Because what's very interesting in working in this way is that we build the piece and make sense of it in the real world, and then it needs to go obviously into its virtual world. So there are some issues there about what's that total experience for the audience member. So adding in audio, for example, was a real finding for us, that sort of made the environment much richer and made it feel much more like an event similar to theatre rather than just watching things happening on a screen. Be really clear about what it is you're saying, because you've got no face moving or anything like that. And be very clear about where you're moving to.
Okay.
And leave really long gaps in between everything that you're doing.
Okay.
Because then it will just start to make more sense to everybody.
Yeah.
Great, perfect.
Small.
Yeah, all your speech is going, perfect. That's it. So go to maybe try and catch Nikki this side. That's really nice. And then wait until Nikki's gone this side. You're lumbering around, saying all of the things. Nikki runs back to the thing, come forward. On your fours, looking into the side. Where's Nikki? Look up at us. Perfect. And then come over this side. Yeah. And then look round at us. You're gonna kill Nikki.
That's good.
Successful? Good.
Just a cube in the way.
Welcome to the Metaverse!
I think we were going to really see the benefits of streaming it live and being able to recenter them constantly.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know if you were picking up.
But the only time it really was noticeable was when Larissa's grew and she was out of the frame. The rest of the time, you can't go away with it.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Oh, okay.
It wouldn't have bothered me at all about happening in the show.
Okay, fine, good.
There are things that annoy me much more.
Like?
Well, like things that could go on, like the mocap breaking or something. Not that happened then, but like when for me, I lost my live stream because when I swapped the Axis Newman project over, it crashed like I expected it would.
Yeah.
And when I reopened it, it then wouldn't detect it. Got it working, but then it deactivated these ones that I'm getting from you. So just I kept having new. Yeah, that's probably more noticeable because it's not. Well, maybe it's noticeable because I noticed it. You don't notice it.
Should we do one more run then, when I'm not recording, and see if that happens? If it's something to do with the thing.
No, it's not to do with you, no. But we do need to do another run.
Yeah.
I'd like to do one with it live. The concept began when we were trying to stream live motion capture into a research experiment in a pre-vis project. And we realised that as people in the company started getting COVID and we were losing them quite quickly, we wanted to pre-record all of the content so we had a backup and we could play it. It started to dawn on us that at that point we are basically providing the same finished content to the audience, whether it's pre-recorded that we are streaming live or it's live content that we're streaming live, the audience gets the same experience. So where exactly is the benefit in having the live performance, which creates a lot of challenges? In order to try to capture this research, we created a fictional production that's based in the Metaverse. The basis of this story was really to support all of the research mechanisms that we had. So to do this, we have 3 key research areas. One is the chat. In the right hand side of the screen, we can see the chat that has been provided by the window where you can type in text. You can see several people talking to each other. One of them is a plant from the audience who is one of our team in order to keep people entertained and make it feel like something's happening. This allowed people to chat in the first part of the show, but it also allowed the character to appear to be talking back to the audience. So at this point in the show, the AI called Hello World is trying to talk to the audience via the chat before we turn on the vocals. This was actually one of the technical team writing into one of the spare computers whilst the performer is performing live and just not speaking. The second mechanism that we had for the research mechanism is the emoji buttons at the top. These are smiles, cries and applause. It allows people to send a message to other people in the audience. They could click the button, it pops up with a large picture of the emoji, spins off into space, and they believe that it's sending that applause or that laughter into the story for everyone to see. What's actually happening is it's only producing any interaction at all on their own device. No one else sees it. The exception to that is that it's creating a log in the admin chat in the bottom left, which is something that only myself as the manager of the server can see. And you can see there that the last interaction at 15:59 was Jack, who had a reaction, which was a clap. And it's just a log for our research to see exactly what people are doing. We also have these voting buttons that allow people to vote, bananas, apples and pears, which works exactly the same way. They created a log so we could see what people were voting, but ultimately they weren't being recorded for the benefit of the production. There was no change to the show as a result of people using the voting buttons. They just believed everyone could see it. We also have these director views and interactive views, and as people are clicking on each of the views it would change. So at the moment we're in director view, which means that I am controlling the position of the camera using pre-recorded cues on our lighting desk. When they click on the interactive mode, it allows them to have free control of the experience. They can then control the movement of the point of view of the camera, the player pawn as we call it, to whatever position they want. At any point they want, they can click on director's view to come back to our curated positions. So now we're seeing the screen pull back because this is something that I triggered as a cue. So we set out to create a demonstrator of our technology as a way of trying to prove whether or not it's necessary to have liveness in performance. The technology and the products that Copper Candle have is built around live streaming. So we're live streaming motion capture, DMX data from lighting desks, and we have a plugin that can take all of that data and manipulate Unreal Engine and the objects in it. So that means that we're perfectly set up to create live streamed 3D environments in real-time game apps. So we wanted to create a demonstrator that could prove whether or not that technology is useful, because it's fundamentally needed for the audience if they want liveness to have all these tools streaming in. So the product we've actually ended up creating is a two-hander 15-minute demonstrator of what we think of as the first two people in the Metaverse, a funny AI robot and the first human being personified as a robot avatar. And behind all of that story is an enormous amount of technology, an app that we've built which is the first stage of a new platform that we're going to launch called Copper House, which will be the world's first virtual venue in the cloud that can be used for co-productions and hires and allow anybody to perform into a virtual venue.
The process itself was very interesting and had a few sort of difficulties converting from what would be the standard process of making a theatre show and then what's the process of making a theatre show in the Metaverse. One thing that we did find as a little bit of a struggle was that the motion capture wasn't really translating as we'd hoped it would in the first few runs of the performance and the sort of the first development stages of the performance. So it was very quick for me as a director to realise that I couldn't really focus on what was happening in the physical space, and I needed to have a directorial view on what was happening in the Metaverse space that we were performing in. And this was really a key learning for me because as a director I work quite spatially, so it was interesting to sort of have to switch between reality and virtual reality.
Hello everybody! Oh, I see we have lots of people here today. Some from LA. Oh, must be sunny over there. It's sunny here too in the Metaverse. Welcome everybody! You know, actually I don't really know what the sun feels like.
So the performance itself, as well as being exaggerative and more like pantomime, it was also really conscious about how the UI of Hello World, which was what the audience would be interacting with at home on their laptops and their computers, we needed to explore the functionality of that within the narrative of the performance. So throughout the performance, the audience are given options to vote on what happens during the performance, and that introduces something called branch narrative structures, which allow us to sort of have one uber narrative that we follow the entire time, but there are lots of options of us how we get there, and that's down to really how the audience want things to evolve during that performance.
I know. Let's change the colors of the walls. So, if you want the walls to be yellow, vote banana.
If you want to change the walls to red, vote apple. If you want to change the walls to purple, vote pear. Brilliant! Lots of votes here, but the number one is for purple. Wow! Oh, that looks just lovely, doesn't it?
So to get to the point we're at now, there were 2-3 things that had to happen in line to be able to get to actually creating a demonstrator. We already had a range of technical tools that we developed, Copper Stream and Bone Stream, our network streaming protocols that we've been patenting to get ready for this new platform launch, and our plugin Q29. So these are all tools that we already had, but they had to be updated and they had to have new features added to them to get them ready for the sort of the strain that we put on them to create this product. We've also had to develop some new tools using external third-party plugins. So we've used a new cloud streaming tool for voice and audio streaming. We created a chat user interface and a way of being able to click on buttons, which is quite standard, but we had to build it into our technology. We also worked with a company called Nemesendo, who is another one of the Audience of the Future Design Foundation's round 2 recipients, and we discovered who they were through that process, working with Innovate UK, and discovered that actually their app is really appropriate for our products as well. So we've worked to integrate the two into our demonstrator today.
So we had our first performance. We had a slight glitch just at the beginning, but really good to know that we can get on top of that quite quickly and fix it, which is the whole point of the mechanism that we've built. It's flexible enough to sort of be able to troubleshoot as we're live in the performance. Today the motion capture suits are working perfectly. We sort of collectively learned there are certain things in the room that need to be removed that interfere with the signals and everything, but we really put down a performance today where spatially it really worked very, very well. And a lot of engagement from the audience, which is a really positive thing, because that's the whole point of the UI, is that we can have an audience that feels like they're engaged in a live event that they have some agency over, and that there's a good level of interactivity there, so they can feel connected to the theatre show that we're producing for them.
Okay, so it's 20 to 5, so we've done, I've lost count of how many performances now, about 4 I think, because we've got 2 more left to go. It's been fine actually. We haven't been plagued with tech problems the way we thought. I don't want to jinx it, but it's the biggest problem has been the motion capture system. We bought quite a cheap system. It was deliberate. We decided rather than hiring a studio for this week, we would buy our own system that's much cheaper, so we could have it for the whole project, so we could do our R&D. That was a good decision to make, and I think in hindsight we'll be glad for it. But right now it's causing us the most anxiety because it keeps breaking during the show. But Copper Canvas technology has been superb. It's just been running really nicely. So it's been quite interesting watching the audience interaction. One thing that was quite funny was there's a character called Cloudy. We don't know, someone's not been using their gaming tags, some have been using their real names, which has been interesting. So it gives a clue as to who or what background they have. One of the interactions from Cloudy is that she obviously dropped out, her app must have crashed. So she came back in as Cloudy again, and one of the characters said, "Oh, and Cloudy's back." And when it happened a third time, she typed into the chat, "I'm back," because I felt like she wanted some sort of reaction, or he wanted some sort of reaction. So it was interesting that they were playing off some of those live spontaneous interactions. That spontaneous liveness from the actors meant that there was a bit more interaction from the audience, maybe it made it feel more live. So I'm going to hang on to that as evidence that liveness is important. Next door we have Rory setting up the performance, so he's doing motion capture equipment, putting on the PN3 suits from Reception Neuron, which are inertial motion suits, so they have sensors but no tracking devices, so they're very, very fiddly and not always working correctly. So it takes a little while to calibrate those every time and get them working. It's all setting up their radio mics. That's all been fed into here via looms of cables that we've set up, and the sound data's been fed through this sound mixer. So we have 2 channels feeding in. I have a headset to listen to the audio that's coming out, so I get the original audio before it goes through the system. That then feeds into my PC with Unreal Engine, and Unreal is then using Photon Cloud to stream that to the remote apps. The motion capture data is streaming into Unreal as well as live link data.
So we have to turn all of that on. So I've got a preset for live link that listens to the two performers' motion capture data coming in. Simultaneously, I have another motion capture system set up on here with pre-recorded motion capture data. So this is stuff we recorded before we started the production process. We filmed it earlier in the week. And I have to switch that live during the performance for some of the pre-recorded moments. We have the screen showing the Unreal output. This is what's going upstream. The one thing that's coming downstream is the DMX data, which is coming from the lighting desk. So this is going into this ArtNet coming out onto a network, onto this little box, which is a Raspberry Pi, streaming CopperStream, which is our protocol, up to the AWS cloud, and it comes back down to every device, including this computer. So this computer's not getting live DMX from the lighting desk, even though literally from there to there, we could send the data, but actually it's going all the way up to the cloud and back down again, so that what I'm receiving here is live. And this is an admin view, so it shows us a lot more stuff that's going on than the audience gets. So we've got an admin chat, so it shows us all the interactions the audience is having. We've got the names of all the users built in, so we can see exactly who's in the show, so we can call them out by name. The audience doesn't see any of that. All they see is these buttons here and the chat window. The buttons are a very clever trick. When you press one, I'll do it now so you can see. If I click the apple, it makes an apple flash up, and it pops up in the admin chat, but it doesn't do anything to anyone else. Nobody can see that, but all the audience are clicking away at those buttons thinking that everyone's getting this experience, and actually it's just for them, and we're recording it in our system, so we have a research record. It just logs the fact that the user pressed that button. So we're keeping that record just as a way of proving in our research that interaction is meaningful to an audience, even though it does absolutely nothing to the production. Nobody knows that it's happening. So that's the sort of the general setup. It's actually quite complicated. There's a lot of technology to make that work.
During the process, we made a lot of discoveries, and I think one of the most important discoveries we made was actually when the performance is running itself, is there needs to be constant communication between the people that are running the software part of the performance and then also the people running the human part of the performance. And we were working with the tech that we were working with. We were working with perception neuron motion capture suits. So within our space, there was a lot of drift. And that was something quite hard to contend with at the beginning stages of this process. But as soon as we had this communication between people that had eyes on the final app experience and myself having eyes on what was happening in the room, we could make calls at the best places to stop that drift from happening and pulling the actors back into the virtual space in a way that sort of makes sense much more for the audience. Another thing I think that we discovered, considering that we set out this research looking at what liveness was for the audience, going back to the idea of the feedback loop of liveness, it's really part and parcel of asking, like, what is liveness for the performer as well? And as soon as those responses started coming in from the audience on our runs and not just our tech rehearsals or our dress rehearsals, there was a sense of the performers sort of getting the medium and understanding that there was a way of still communicating with an audience directly and in real time. And that really gave a massive sense of liveness to the performance that just wasn't there in rehearsals. And I think that's similar in a traditional method, but it was really acutely obvious that when somebody typed into the chat and engaged in the narrative that the performers were telling them, it really brought the whole thing alive much more.
So we've been looking at the audience feedback. They've been completing a survey at the end of the performance. So there's sort of two mechanisms we have of recording that data. One is the interactions they have during the show, which we do through buttons that get fed into a log, so they don't see their interactions with each other. And this is a very deliberate way of testing whether or not they notice the liveness in the production. So we have this record of every production that's just saved as a chat log, showing all of those interactions that we can analyse. And the other is the survey, which reveals to them that actually some moments of the show were pre-recorded. So they have a mixture of live and pre-recorded content. And there's also moments of voting in the show that lean towards the non-linear narrative principles. So we're trying to see if the audience want to change the narrative of the story or change the environment they're in. And these voting buttons take us in different directions. In truth, it doesn't. We have tricked the audience and they think that they're getting a response that they chose as part of a vote with the wider audience, and in fact we've already predetermined what the answer is going to be. And the survey helps us figure this out to find out, did they notice? And there's been some wonderful moments during the live experience where we've only had one member of the audience and they thought they were getting a much larger experience with other people because of the way we delivered the performance, and we started to see that they didn't even realise they were on their own, which helps us think that as an audience experience, to answer the question directly, liveness is important, but only if it's perceived to be real, not actually real. This means a great deal to the way we can produce theatre in the future, because if virtual theatre can be made affordable and profitable, it needs to not rely on everything being live, because it can't operate with the overheads that would need to make it an affordable business model.
So we had 150 people come to see our show, of which 60 of them, or 59 people, responded to the survey. The majority of these people came to see the first two performances, which unfortunately had audio issues. So a lot of our results were skewed towards negativity because of the quality of the audio, which some of them have fed back on. However, a lot of the responses are still valid because they weren't related to the quality of the performance. We had a good demographic of people who came to see the show, mainly made up of gamers and theatre makers or theatre goers. We had an even split of ages and an equal split of gender. Most of the people that came to see the show would identify as either a theatre goer or a gamer. We were interested to find out how many people came to see the show also went to see films in the cinema. The significance of the cinema in relation to the research we're doing is that cinema is pre-recorded content as opposed to theatre, which is live, but you see both of them as a shared experience in an auditorium or a theatre. So it was interesting to see how many people considered cinema an experience they would go to regularly, who would also go to see theatre, because this is possibly the type of audience we are looking for our product, the type of audience who would be interested in seeing something that is both a shared experience and a mixture of being live and pre-recorded. We wanted to find out if this performance was something that felt more like theatre or felt more like a computer game. We had an interesting response from the quantitative results, which suggested that nobody felt like it was theatre and nobody didn't feel like theatre as a statistical value, but the majority of people sat somewhere in between, which suggests that they really didn't know what it was, didn't want to say either way. Qualitative responses are interesting because it's clearly live. There was a lot of waiting and I was unsure if you could see me or if I was having any effect of what I was doing. Some of the other responses that are interesting. The initial setup felt like a traditional proscenium arch audience viewpoint, which is familiar. Also, the audience interaction was very similar to some of the reactions that I've seen as an audience member watching dance theatre productions. I think it would take a bit of time to start viewing this type of performance as similar to the more traditional performance settings. I should state that our intention of our products is not to replicate live theatre. We are not trying to replace it or replicate it in any way. We're trying to create something new, but we appreciate that our audience come from that market, so we're interested in their opinion of the performance as an extension of what they're used to. And we tried to find out what we would call this experience, what the name of it would be. Metaverse theatre came out on top, which we're glad about because that's the term that we've taken to use. We wanted to know how connected the audience felt to the experience. So for most of the audience, they felt like they had more connection with the audience in our experience than they do in normal theatre, just by the average of the two results shown here. We think this might be because in live theatre, physical theatre, you cannot chat to the cast or the characters. You cannot use voting buttons. These were tools that we introduced into our system, which provided additional interaction to connect you with the audience and the actors. Clapping, laughing and gasping are always great ways of being part of a performance together. I felt that it was hard to ascertain whether anyone else was laughing, clapping or gasping during this performance. And that is an interesting response because we deliberately didn't share people's claps and laughs with each other. And this was a mechanism that we used to determine how people reacted to liveness in this experience. It's one of our research mechanisms. The feeling of connection is, for me, the defining characteristic of live in-person theatre. You don't get it every time, of course, but when you do, it makes it feel far more immersive and moving. You feel part of a bigger emotional conversation with the performers. In Hello World, did you feel you were connected as part of an audience with others? People felt they weren't, on the whole, as an average. We felt it was important that the audience knew those other audience members there. Now there were some performances where only one person turned up, so we created fake audience members in order to give them the sense of togetherness. This was really important because we wanted to try to provide that feeling of a shared experience, because it's one of our notions for the research is that the shared audience experience is what matters, not so much that the performers themselves are live, but that the rest of the audience is live and that you feel that you are sharing it with them together. This is why cinema works, and it is why people are happy to watch live sport, which is actually pre-recorded and presented at a scheduled time, and they'll go to a pub and watch it together. This is necessary to create the sense of togetherness, and is what we think is the most important part of most shared experiences. So we really wanted to emphasise the shared experience in our project and our research, so that everybody had a feeling of togetherness. And we asked people to rate how connected they were with the audience in the show. The audience on the whole felt connected when there was interactions with our user interface. They could use the chat to talk, they could press the voting buttons. People felt that chatting with each other before the show was a really useful way of interacting. What's interesting about the results is when the character spoke directly to us came up quite high, which is expected because somebody is engaging with you as a person. You're actually listening to what you're typing in the chat and they're responding to you, then that tells you that something is happening and this character's listening to you and they're connected. We got more responses from when we pushed the voting buttons. People generally felt that they were more connected when the voting had some sort of interaction on the show. So the entire purpose of this research was to discover if audiences would notice liveness, and one of the mechanisms we had was this fake button pushing, and this particular graph here proves that the audience were quite happy to use something that didn't have any interaction with the live experience. For us, this is proof that liveness is not necessary to create the connected experience, and leans us towards believing that it's about the shared experience. If we can create fake voting buttons and the audience enjoys using those to feel like something's live, then maybe it's not necessary to have live elements in the production and give them the same experience. We asked the question if the audience were connected or do they understand the performance was delivered by live performers in motion capture suits. We were trying to find out at this point in the survey if the audience would have noticed that there was pre-recorded elements. So we haven't revealed to them that there is a difference in the live performance and the pre-recorded. To what extent do you feel the entire performance was performed by actors in motion capture suits? The majority said yes, it was. At this point, nobody or very few people were predicting that the motion capture was in any way pre-recorded. And would you state overall that this production was successful as a way of delivering a live experience? The majority said yes, they quite enjoyed seeing a live experience delivered in this way. So at the beginning of this project, for me, liveness was something I looked at quite cynically as a person with a background as a lighting operator. Because you'd hit that record button and the play button every night on a show and have pre-recorded data just running. And the audience, they don't know that all of the lighting cues, often the click track and the MD's ear is all being used to control the pace of the show. And the liveness is really driven by effectively a tape deck that's running in the background, controlling a lot of the interactions. And I'm talking about certain types of theatre here, not all. Now I think of liveness as something that is actually about the audience experience, and we had this notion before we went into the programme and assumed that it's about the shared experience, so we tried to create an environment that would test if audiences enjoyed being with each other. But one thing we discovered that we weren't expecting is how important live feedback was for the cast and the audience. This is something I didn't appreciate, not being a performer, but as an audience member, it's nice to know that your applause is reciprocated on stage by better performance and it moves around, and how difficult it is for a performer to perform without reaction. So creating live reaction means that it justifies the need for live performers, and it justifies the need for live simultaneous interactions from both audience and cast. So that was a bit of a revelation for me as a researcher and as an audience member and a professional. But it also helps justify the notions that we were trying to draw conclusions from at the beginning of this research process.
Our first thought was, if we were staging this performance, it may not be as engaging if the audience were just sat there at home on their own, maybe with a cup of tea, watching something on a screen. That can feel quite removed, and that's a big difference between, say, television and theatre. So there's that aspect of liveness again, and that's something we really, really wanted to unpick. Another option as well was the fact that they could give us a response just like they would in the theatre. So if they didn't like something, there was a little sad face that would give us that gesture, and then the performers would be able to get that feedback in real time and respond and maybe change the tone of the address just to sort of bring people in and keep them engaged. There was also a happy reaction and an applause reaction, and interestingly, throughout our run so far, we've seen that as theatre audiences tend to do at the end of the performance, there was a lot of applause. And for us in the rooms, specifically the performers, it's really great to have that feedback. And that feeds into our discussion of liveness, these ideas of these feedback loops between the performer and the audience, which seem, I think, now through our findings, really, really central to keeping liveness in this new form of theatre.
What I've been really interested in today is the amount of conversation that we've had about audience experience. Yeah. It's not been about performer experience.
Absolutely.
And so there's something there to think about.
Yeah.
And is that because we're coming from a gamer, interactive point of view?
I think it's a VR as well.
It's yeah.
And
I think,
also that,
I
but
think,
just like bouncing off that thing
Yeah.
about it being performer centric, I think it feels like this has really shifted to being very audience centric.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the reason, totalising reason for that is our research question is asking what is the audience experience of it. However, that does not lessen your point.
But I think
in the process of our practice, is a good learning point for us.
I cannot speak for you, Nikki, but that might be because I've been focused on that the entire time.
Yeah.
And this is the first time you may be actually feeling it, because you don't interact with the audience as much as I do.
Yeah.
Like I am the bridge between the two. And I think today having the people, it's like when you open a show, you're like, oh, they're finally laughing. Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
You know? So that might be why, but I completely understand. I mean, I was definitely hamming it up way more because I was like, oh, they love that. Oh, they love that. Exactly. So
But there was also a decision that we made a long time ago, back to like decision makers in the pyramid thing, because we said, who should we have as performers? I mean, I said I would like people who have done research, because we're doing a research project. We need to be able to have these conversations.
Yeah.
So you two are the top of our list, because we went, well, yeah, we could just go and get 2 actresses who are really good actresses, but maybe wouldn't be engaged in the comedy conversations, and these conversations were more important.
Massive.
It's great that you're brilliant at everything, but that was a really important part.
Backtracking.
No, I think.
Sorry, we know our position now.
I think it's a very big thing to take into consideration.
And as well, like for me, today, it was getting that audience feedback, but then that in a way for me is probably quite an egotistical thing as well, because a big part of what you do as a performer or a choreographer is you put work out there in order for it to be appreciated by an audience, right?
So you want to see that.
So like today, when I then understood what that side chat box, not the one that the audience can see, but that one, and I was like, and I was excited for you because I'm like, they're clapping, and I wanted to tell you, and that wasn't even about me at that point. And like the whole time that you're performing that first bit, I'm just stood there like, me and Rory are going, you know, and those moments, I think, like.
It is quite exciting in this room when it's happening.
Yeah.
But that's something that's never happened before, because of the way we built this.
Well,
Any other remote virtual theatre solution, whether that's live stream theatre or unless the people in the room with that, watching the shared experience, the in-home experience has never before had this sort of feedback, live and iterative.
Well,
it's something we've created.
Absolutely, and just to get slightly theoretical just for a second,
Go for it.
it is that idea of the feedback loop that is at the heart of liveness. Is that is the argument. That's one of the major things, is that there is this reciprocal feedback loop between the performers and audience.
Yeah. I mean, when you
that's what we've created in a different manner. So.
When you came back and said Isaac loved it, I was like, that makes me want to try even harder for the next group. And like, I think like that made us get better and better. And like, I was like, okay, I know Isaac fucking loves this. I just know it, even if I don't know it. I was like, I know it.
And then every performance you do after that, you imagine an Isaac at the other side of the screen.
100%.
And you're like, oh, I want the next person to feel that joy that Isaac felt, right?
Even I have no idea, like he loved it. To me, I'm just like, oh my god, it's the best experience, you know? Don't actually know.
Well, when this conversation started way back when we were doing the band, you know, when I asked an actor, because I haven't done performance since I was a kid, but when you stand, I'm told, when you stand on stage, what you love about the liveness as an actor, and this is where the performance bias comes from, so you're thinking about yourself as a performer in front of an audience. It's about that moment. You know that the audience is there watching you, you can feel them. And that's what we don't get from...
I think you do.
I
do, definitely.
So what's interesting is the survey is suggesting mixed results, whether or not they have that connection with you, but you are having that connection with the audience.
Especially like when I heard the first performance, somebody wrote cyan, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think that's blue. That's a great color.
And you even said to me afterwards, you were like, cyan is blue, right?
But that's when it made it so real for me, because I was like, okay, this is happening. People are actually here. They're doing it. They're watching us. It worked for me.
So to make the production happen, we actually set it up in Copper Candle's offices, which is in Bromley. It's actually a village hall, and we've rented a room to perform in, which is the room I'm standing in now. And in my office, which is basically a cupboard, we have a lighting desk, a sound desk, we have comms. We needed, but don't have, a DSM, a lighting operator. It's basically theatre. So it's really reassuring to know that there's an industry of people out there with skills and processes, and there's technology that already exists that can just be lifted from that world and put into the world that we are trying to build into, and give all those people access to game engines, to virtual theatre, to metaverses, which is the principle behind this project. That's really empowering for our industry to know that there's a new sector that's just there for them. And really, it makes me proud to think that Copper Candle's developed a technology that bridges those two worlds together.
I've read every manual and watched every tech video out there in the past millisecond, and everybody says the best thing to do with a computer issue, or any technical issue really, is to turn it off and then back on again, okay?
Off and then on again. Yeah.
It's called a hard reset.
A hard what now?
Hard reset. Yeah.
And what does that do exactly?
It just reboots the system, restarts everything. I'm gonna be totally fine.
Yep. And me, I'm gonna be totally fine.
I think it's about 38% chance that you'll survive. 20% chance that it won't be painful, but it's gonna be fine. Okay.
Those odds do not seem good.
The statistic seems pretty normal to me. So you know what? I'm just gonna start in 5.
No, wait. How many?
3.
Just stop, please.
2. So nice to meet everybody. 1.
Whoa. Oh, hello, AI person. Hello, world.